It's no secret that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become one of the most complex, interconnected franchises in movie history. Over the years, it's expanded so much that it's almost impossible to keep track of every character, timeline, and world. But things have recently taken an even more confusing turn, especially for one character who's expected to play a huge role in Thor 5. Because while we've already seen a bunch of wild concepts like the Nine Realms, time travel, and alternate realities, Marvel seems to have thrown in something that's made the whole mythology around Thor even harder to make sense of. Ever since the first Thor movie, the God of Thunder story has explored the Nine Realms, those interconnected worlds tied to Norse mythology. We've seen Asgard, Midgard, which is Earth, and a handful of other realms that connect to the broader cosmic side of the MCU. By the time Thor: Love and Thunder came around, fans were already expecting the franchise to move towards something even bigger. The movie ended by teasing what looked like a setup for Thor 5. In the post-credit scene, Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, sends his son Hercules, yes, the Hercules from Greek mythology, on a mission to kill Thor. It was a fun setup and had people guessing what kind of showdown might happen next. But now, with some of Marvel's newer projects, that storyline has gotten unexpectedly tangled up with other mythologies, and it's raising some serious timeline questions. The big issue started when Eyes of Wakanda was released. The show, or special, dove deep into ancient stories that took place hundreds of years before the modern MCU timeline. It didn't just explore Wakanda's early history, it also tied in myths and legends that most of us would have never thought existed in the same universe as the Avengers. One of the major references was to the Battle of Troy, a story that comes straight out of Greek mythology. Now, in real life, the Battle of Troy is a mix of history and legend, told through ancient poems like the Iliad. But in Eyes of Wakanda, Marvel seems to confirm that this battle actually happened within the MCU's sacred timeline. And that's where everything gets messy. Because if the Battle of Troy is officially real in the MCU's history, that means a bunch of other mythological tales, ones we used to think were just stories, might also be true. So, where does that leave Hercules? We last saw him in Thor: Love and Thunder's post-credits, being ordered by Zeus to take down Thor. The plan was pretty clear. He'd show up as a kind of rival god in Thor 5. But now, Eyes of Wakanda has thrown a wrench in that setup by confirming that Greek myths like the Trojan War actually happened. That suggests that Hercules might not just be a godly figure from another realm, but an actual historical being within the MCU's main timeline. It's tricky because Thor's journey, up to now, has always been grounded in one consistent reality, Earth 616, which is considered the main timeline in the MCU. Even when he traveled to other worlds or met different gods in Love and Thunder, it all seemed to take place within that same reality. But Eyes of Wakanda opens the door to ancient events that predate everything we've seen so far, and that could mean there are much deeper layers to the MCU's past than anyone realized. So if the MCU is saying that the Battle of Troy really happened, that means heroes and gods from those myths existed long before Thor ever landed on Earth. And that raises a big question. How many of these mythological figures, Greek, Norse, Egyptian, or otherwise, are actually part of the same reality? We've already seen the Egyptian gods in Moon Knight, the Norse gods through Thor and Odin, and now Greek figures like Zeus and Hercules. If all of them coexist in the same universe, then what does that mean for humanity's connection to the divine across history? What's interesting is that Marvel has always hinted that myths in the MCU might be rooted in real events. For example, humans might have built their mythologies around encounters with these actual godlike beings. Thor himself has often been portrayed as the inspiration for Norse legends on Earth. But now that other mythologies are being confirmed as real, it's getting difficult to tell what's a legend and what's literal truth in the MCU's continuity. That's why Thor 5 feels like it's arriving at the perfect moment. It could finally be the movie that connects all these confusing threads and explains how the MCU's history of gods and myths actually fits together. Because fans have been wondering for a while, are these gods living in different dimensions, or are they all part of one big ancient family tree that stretches across human history? So, what could Thor 5 actually do with all of this? Well, first off, it's the ideal opportunity to define what's real in the sacred timeline. Since the sacred timeline represents the main flow of MCU events, the one kept in order by the TVA in Loki, it would make sense to use Thor 5 to clarify how these mythological beings fit within that. We might finally learn whether Hercules is from the same dimension as Thor or from a different one entirely. The movie could also explore how humans throughout history perceived these gods, because even though we've seen mortals interact with Thor in modern times, the MCU hasn't really shown what it was like thousands of years ago when humanity might have actually worshipped beings like him or Zeus. If Eyes of Wakanda prove that myths like Troy are canon, then Thor 5 has a golden chance to explain how gods like Thor, Zeus, and Hercules influenced early civilizations. There's also the question of how Avengers: Secret Wars will affect the story, because if Secret Wars truly reshapes the multiverse, which it's expected to, then Thor 5 might not even take place in the same version of reality we've been following. It could happen in a new or reconstructed universe, where myth and reality blur even more. That would allow Marvel to tweak the rules and merge mythological lore from different pantheons without having to explain every single contradiction from the past. Still, even if it does take place after Secret Wars, Thor 5 has the chance to give closure to Thor's journey and at the same time make sense of the MCU's messy timeline of gods. Thor's connection to Earth has always been one of the strongest parts of his story. He's not just a god, he's someone who's chosen humanity as his second home. That bond could be the emotional anchor of the next movie, especially if he's forced to face Hercules, a being who might see humans as beneath him. The clash between those two worldviews could make for a fascinating story, especially since Thor has evolved so much since his earlier, more arrogant days. It's also worth mentioning that Marvel has been trying to perfect Thor's tone and character balance for over a decade. From Thor to The Dark World, Ragnarok, and Love and Thunder, the franchise has experimented with different styles, from Shakespearean drama to cosmic comedy. Some fans love the humor, others prefer the serious mythological angle, but Thor 5 could finally bring it all together. It's almost like the universe has outgrown its original setup, and now it needs to explain how all these pantheons, Norse, Greek, Egyptian, and maybe even others, fit together under one cosmic umbrella. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.